Hi, this is David Odell with Odell Complete Concrete. You may have seen part of this video in the retaining wall. Now what we're going to show is the actual driveway replacement. Same location. Here we are here with a little skid steer, a New Holland. We're removing all of the concrete in the driveway area. The retaining wall was in the first video. Now we're going to be working on this driveway. It had some brick ribbons in it, and the brick had settled. It was starting to come apart. There's no reinforcement in this driveway, and you can see how easily it lifts out without a breaker attachment on the skid steer. It just lifts out in nice big sections, and we throw them in the truck. We got a fairly New Holland tractor here, and it seems to be lifting some pretty large pieces pretty effortlessly. So all this concrete's going to be recycled into some road base once they run it through the grinder. Now this brick, they don't reuse that for base because it's not very strong material. So that's going to go to a separate dump, and that's why you see it separated there. So I'm just kind of fine-tuning it right now. I'm going to do the final tuning with this tractor. I did a little bit of driving on the New Holland on the retaining wall video, and today I'm jumped in it again just to do a final grade. Seems to work really nicely. That's my first time on a New Holland. It worked fine. Now we ran into a drain problem here. There was an existing drain that went under this driveway from the backyard, and I located it by accident, just removing some concrete and hitting it with the tractor, and it was pretty well shot out. It was full of dirt, and there were a lot of breaks in the line. It wasn't a solid pipe. It was like corrugated, flexible type pipe that collects a lot of dirt and debris in it. So we're going to switch it out, so at least under the driveway, the new driveway section, we have good solid pipe that's easy to snake, easy to clean. Now beyond where we end with this 3-inch solid pipe, that's a whole nother story, but that's on the other side of that vinyl fence. We brought it all the way to the vinyl fence, so the backyard is a little different situation back there, but it may be solid pipe back there, I don't know. Now we're wetting this soil up. We're getting ready to compact. I got a little plate compactor there. It's about 22 inches wide. It works real great for this stuff, where you don't have to compact more than 2 to 4 inches at a time. And on the top of this retaining wall, I'm just kind of cutting off and adjusting my area drains. I'm going to use an atrium cap on these drains on top of the retaining wall to catch all the ground, the surface water. So we go over this compaction 2 times with the plate compactor, one way in both directions. And we're gonna put number 3 or 3/8 rebar in here. We're gonna put them about 2 foot centers in both directions. And if you had been watching any of my other videos, most of the concrete I tear out is concrete that doesn't have steel in it. So if you had steel in it, it probably wouldn't have cracked to begin with. Or if it did crack, it would have at least held nice and tight together without any settling or separation. So this rebar is just about tied up here, but I'd like to mention that my little write-up in the LA Voyager, it's an internet blog basically, or magazine that just posts on the internet stories about how people got started in whatever field they happen to be doing. And that's live now. I'm going to be putting a link in the description section. A little bit about my store that I added to my website with the shirts and hats. I also added, which my wife made, some candles and soaps. Now this particular type of soil, I ended up wetting this thing down for about 3 days. It really sucked up the water. It's real important that you water heavily and get the ground really nice and moist before you pour concrete. A lot of times what will happen in some situations I've seen, if you don't wet it down and then irrigation starts running, it gets under the soil and expands the soil. You can get a lot of cracking, so you want to maximize your water in the soil before you pour. That way you're at the maximum expansion of that soil. So if it ever does get hit with a lot of water, it's not going to affect it. Here we are showing the screed pins that I set up. This is how I'm going to be able to get my grade and my concrete to the elevations I want it at when I start pouring. Here's the level showing the slope. You know we got good slope since we're on the side of a hill. Here we are starting to pour out, and this is a 3000 psi 3/8 pea gravel. You could potentially tailgate something like this right off of the back of the truck and then go to like a big rock mix. However, I went with the pump because I would have had to back up probably over the existing apron approach, and it may have taken some serious damage, or maybe even the curb and gutter could have took some damage. So I decided to pump it in to so I wouldn't have to take that risk of breaking something. Also, since I have rebar, if I had backed in the concrete truck, it would have destroyed the rebar. It probably would have got entangled in the axle. It could have been a potential real mess. So this is a sure shot right here without any problems. Now I like leaving that rebar on the ground until the pour, for the simple reason it's a trip hazard for one thing. If you leave it up on dobies overnight, That could be a real hazard for anybody passing through on foot. Also, I like to leave it on the ground because when we start pouring, we're walking on that rebar, it's going to get bent up because it's a 3/8 and it's not very strong. So you can't really walk on it without it bending. So as you pour backwards, you pull that rebar up, it doesn't go back down, and it stays right where you lift it to. Now you don't want to get that rebar too high. This is real important in a 4-inch slab. If you get it up too high, and really dobies are typically too high in a 4-inch slab, because what happens is any cracking at the surface and water penetrating gets in contact with that rebar in the slab, and it expands and it cracks straight lines right on top of the rebar. I have a lot of photos of such an occurrence where people have put the rebar in there and pulled it too close to the surface, or maybe they had it on dobies. They thought that was the right thing to do, but turns out it's really not in a 4-inch slab. Turns out it's better to have that rebar down low near the bottom. That way you don't get water penetration through surface cracks and expansion of rebar, causing a lot of problems. So this is the best way to do it. I've never had a problem with this system. I can go back at any of my jobs anytime, talk to the people, the homeowners, whoever it might be, and it's going to be great every time. Also, I put fiber mesh in here too, just for overnight shrinkage cracks, because I didn't do any wet cutting on this concrete, which turns out to be a mistake in this situation. We're out here in about 100-degree temperature, 3,000 psi. I got the 4-foot power trowel going, which is really nice for consolidation, but we still pulled a crack off the corner of that existing apron approach. By the time I came back in the morning, I already had started to pull about a 4-foot in length crack off of that corner of the apron approach. Not real alarming, since we're going to saw cut it and then try to control the length that's going to run. And then also, it's never going to get to a point where it's a trip hazard or any kind of a nuisance problem, since we have all the rebar in there holding everything tight together. I may be investing in a soft cut machine in the near future, so I can pour these larger slabs and then saw cut them in the same day of the pour. Well, I can run a soft cut out on poles without messing up the concrete and getting some good control joints in. So we did all the proper procedures for crack preventative measures, and we put the concrete cure on there right after the broom. But like my dad always said, ice cream melts and concrete cracks, and it's just the way it is. This retaining wall happens to be in another video. That was our first video of this particular job site. So here's the day after the pour, morning, about 7 a.m. Getting ready to saw cut, getting laid out. Now right here is where I found the crack that happened overnight. Was off of, actually it wasn't off the corner of the apron approach, it was off the corner of this retaining wall, and it went straight over to the curb on the street side. So it was only about a 10-foot in length. But I personally don't really like cracking of any sort, you know, but in this case it was inevitable, I guess, since I didn't have a I didn't wet tool joint it. Now I'm cutting about an inch deep with this diamond blade skill saw here. Actually, this saw is actually a Bosch, which bought out skill saw, I guess. No, that's a rigid. No, that was a rigid that I'm using here. So this is what it looks like after I've completed the cuts, and we're at about 10-foot by 8-foot squares everywhere. This apron approach and the front going down the sidewalk may be phase 3 of this job. That may all come out. I've got good expansion joint around the existing concrete, along the garage, along the retaining wall, so I can remove this concrete without damaging any of the driveway whatsoever. Yeah, I'd like to emphasize how important it is to actually hire a licensed contractor to do any of these projects, unless of course you're doing them yourself. If you're hiring anybody, you want to get a licensed contractor, because they're going to be accountable for anything that may happen on the job site, and that way you don't have a problem in the future. Anyway, thank you for watching the video, and remember the storefront: candles, soap, shirts, caps.